Welcome to this advanced shell scripting video titled How to Automatically Generate Documentation from Shell Scripts. This video describes how to automatically generate documentation from scripts using a program called AutoContent. This program extracts the comments and usage messages from any shell script and generates HTML formatted documentation. The AutoContent program is itself a shell script and will be used in this video to demonstrate several concepts such as how to properly document a shell script, how to embed comments in shell scripts for the purpose of automated documentation, how to create usage messages for a shell script, and how to automatically generate HTML documentation from extracted comments and usage messages. So first, let's look at the AutoContent script itself so we can see how it is documented within the script. And this will help illustrate the concepts I'm about to describe. So we're going to go look at the source code to the shell script, and we can see in this script at the top of the script there is a function called usage message AutoContent. And this function displays a help message when requested by a user or when an invalid option or argument is used. And if we scroll down some more, we can see a comment section following this function, and the comments in this section are divided into stanzas titled description, and we can see, scrolling down some more, we can see assumptions, and we can see dependencies and products, configured usage, and details. So also notice in these comment lines that each of these lines begins with 4 hash marks followed by a space. This sequence is used by the AutoContent script to designate which comment lines in the script should be extracted for the generated HTML documentation. So that is a marker that indicates which comments are going to be extracted automatically. So if we keep scrolling down a little more in this script, we can see that there is a function here called AutoContent, and that is the main body of this script. So if we keep scrolling down some more, we can see that there are additional comment sections within the main body of the AutoContent function. Now remember that only comments beginning with the sequence of 4 hash marks followed by a space are extracted for the automated documentation generator. So also notice that there are blank lines in here, and these are used when it's generating the documentation. It will use those blank lines as paragraph markers. So those blank lines are important. They shouldn't be removed because that helps organize your comments when it generates the HTML documents. Now also notice there are lines here that end in a colon character. These lines are marked with HTML, or marked in bold in the HTML output. So a line ending with a colon is marked as bold. Blank lines, and this is considered a blank line, is a paragraph marker, and then this section in the HTML output would then be formatted as a paragraph. So scrolling down more in the AutoContent script, we see numerous sections in this script that are describing what the code is doing along the way. So there's lots and lots of comments within this script, which is the way your scripts ought to be documented in order to be able to generate documentation from these scripts. And notice that the comments are divided into paragraphs so that each is so that the generated HTML documentation will reflect those same paragraph divisions. See that there's a paragraph marker, meaning a blank line, 4 hash marks followed by a blank. There's a paragraph marker at the beginning and at the end, so that it puts a paragraph marker at the beginning and end of each one of these. And so that ensures that all the paragraphs are going to be organized correctly in your HTML output. Now, it doesn't matter that there's multiple ones here, that you're going to end up with multiple paragraph markers consecutively, because when it reformats or when it finalizes the HTML output, it will remove multiple consecutive paragraph markers. They're going to collapse those into a single paragraph marker in the final HTML output. So if I continue scrolling through the AutoContent code, we can see there are lots and lots of comments embedded within the code. And this is good programming practice and allows for future programmers to easily understand and maintain your code. It also gives us the ability to automatically generate documentation from our code rather than having to write separate documents from it. So it makes life much easier when you put lots of comments in your code. It allows us to automate things. So one of the best benefits of doing it this way is that it makes script writing much easier. It makes documentation a part of the script writing process. So now the programmers are not writing documentation, they're writing code. They're coding the documentation into the scripts, and programmers typically don't like writing documentation, but they do like programming, and so this methodology makes documentation a part of the script writing. It's no longer drudgery, it's programming. The script writer is programming the documentation. So this methodology also ensures that the script code is standardized into a consistent and repeatable manner. This provides new programmers with a foundation for maintaining code and learning how things operate in your environment. It ensures that the documentation is standardized and written in a consistent and repeatable manner. Again, this makes business continuity, disaster recovery, maintenance, support, and training much easier. This methodology also ensures that documentation is always up to date, because you can then schedule your documentation to be updated automatically from the scripts every day, week, month, or whatever time period is desired. So let's go back to the top of the script, and if you remember at the top of the script we had a usage message function, usage message underscore AutoContent. So let's go to a command prompt now and run this script and generate that usage message. So if we see what directory I'm in, we'll see we have an AutoContent script out here, and it is executable. So I'm going to run that with the -? option to generate the usage message. And so now what we see, it generated that usage message, and we see there are several components. Here's where we ran the command, and here we see there is a section in here called program that gives the program name and a short description of the program. We see a usage section where it gives a syntax example of the various options, and we also see a where section where it explains the details of each of the options. And I'm going to talk about some of these options so we know what the AutoContent script is capable of doing for us. So let's look at these options to the AutoContent script, and we can see that the first three options are the -?, -v, and -v. Now these should probably be included in all scripts that you write, and we'll talk a little more about those later. The next four options, the -D, H, L, and F, all specify information about something called the data file. And this data file contains records that are a list of scripts that are to be documented using the AutoContent methodology. So the data file contains the list of instructions telling AutoContent what to document, which scripts to generate documentation for. And I'll describe this data file in much greater detail later, but for now let's look at the remaining options in the AutoContent script. Normally the AutoContent script generates HTML documentation files associated with each script identified in that data file. If you specify the -O option, it tells it not to generate those files, but instead to send the HTML output directly to standard output or the screen. So from there they can be redirected if desired. So -O tells it not to generate those files but to send the HTML output to the screen. Now by default, we'll talk about the -C and the -U option next, but it's important to know that by default the AutoContent script creates two separate HTML documentation files for each script that is identified in that data file. The first file contains the script code itself, so it HTML encodes the script code and puts it in a document. And then the second file contains the extracted usage message from running the script and then those comments that we saw in the script. It extracts those comments that all begin with the 4 hash marks and a space and inserts that into HTML documentation and encodes it. So if you use the -C option on the command line with the AutoContent script, it will only generate the code file or the HTML document that contains the script code. If you use the -U option, it will only generate the HTML document that contains the extracted messages and the extracted usage message and comments from the script. We will skip the -P option for now. It will make more sense after we discuss the data file. But by default, the AutoContent script generates HTML files that are intended to be used with server-side include functions, meaning that the generated documentation files are intended to be included by other HTML files using SSI or server-side include directives. This allows the generated documentation to be automatically included into an existing look and feel of a documentation website and to utilize style sheets and other tools that may already exist in your web server environment. So normally by default it generates SSI include files. Now the capital H function we see here causes the generated documentation to be created as standalone HTML files instead of the server-side include or SSI files. If the -H function, the capital H function, is specified on the command line, it will also cause the AutoContent script to look for files in your home directory called .autocontent_header.html and .autocontent_footer.html. Now don't worry about those names right now. It's here in the documentation and we're going to look at those as well. If it finds either of these files, it will add the content of these files to the beginning or end of the generated HTML documentation. The capital T and the capital F options cause the AutoContent script to use the specified file. So if you say -T followed by a file name, it'll use that specified file for the beginning or header of the standalone HTML output. If you use -F followed by a file name, it'll use that file as the footer for your standalone HTML content. Now then, if you specify a capital T or a capital F option on the command line, then capital H is implied. So if you specify either one of these, you don't also have to specify capital H. So now let's talk about the data file that we previously mentioned. This contains the list of scripts that are to be automatically documented, the list of scripts that you want to run the AutoContent file against in order to generate documentation for those scripts. So let's look at the default data file, which would be in your home directory, and it would be called AutoContent.dat. So let's see what directory I'm in. And so if we go up to my home directory, I'll clear that. See that we're in the home directory, and I'm going to vi.autocontent.dat, and that is the default data file name. And so we see the contents of this file. It has one record in it, meaning there's only one script identified in this file to be documented. You can have multiple record lines, of course, and identify as many scripts to document as you want. So each line of this file contains two primary fields, and those fields are separated by a pipe symbol, and I'm going to kind of point that out here. So these first two fields, here's a field here, and there was the pipe symbol that I separated onto a separate line, and then here's the other field. So for each record in the data file, the first field contains the following information. It contains the SSH port number, hold on one second. So it contains the port number, SSH port number for communication with the local or remote system where the script to be documented exists, followed by a colon character. So we see the colon character there. So this is identifying a port number on a remote system or a local system, and that is followed by the SSH username for login to the local or remote system where the script to be documented exists, and that is followed by the @ sign, and then that is followed by a host name or IP address to a local or remote system where the script to be documented exists, followed by a colon character, and then that is followed by the full path name on the local or remote system where the script to be documented exists. Now this last segment of this field is optional, and it may or may not exist depending upon the capabilities of the script to be documented. So this last segment of this first field is specified if the script to be documented is capable of generating a usage message. If the -? option is specified on the command line. However, now be aware that if this last segment is specified, the colon -? This last segment, the remote script will be executed with this option, the -? option. So do not specify the colon -? segment if the script does not recognize this option. The reason is because the script will be executed, and whatever it is that the script does, it's going to do it, and this could have unintended consequences. So to reiterate, only specify this last segment, the colon -? if the script to be documented recognizes this option and generates a usage message when it is executed with this option. Otherwise, don't specify the colon -? segment, not even the trailing colon. So in this example, the AutoContent script, this script that we've identified, does recognize this -? option, so we will include it here. And then following that, is the pipe symbol, which identifies the end of that field. And then that brings us to the second field of each record line, which consists of the local or remote location in which to place the automatically generated documentation. The second field of each record consists of the following information. It contains the SSH port number for communication with the local or remote system where the generated documentation is to be placed. And then that field is followed by a colon. And then that is followed by an SSH username for login to the local or remote system where the generated documentation is to be placed, followed by the @ character. And that is followed by a host name or IP address of the local or remote system where the generated documentation is to be placed, followed by a colon character. And then finally the full path directory name on the local or remote system where the generated documentation is to be placed. So this is a directory name, not a file name. So now I'm going to reassemble this record line so that we can see what it's supposed to look like fully assembled. And so we see that it has two fields again. So the first field here up to the pipe symbol, and then here's the second field. So what we're doing with this record line is telling AutoContent, the AutoContent script, to automatically generate documentation for itself. And it will use the -? option on the command line to generate a usage message while extracting comments from the script. So understand the data file can have multiple records that we specify as many scripts as we want. Now these scripts can exist on the local system or on remote systems. If they are on remote systems, then passwordless SSH access is expected. If they are local, then no SSH access is required, but the record line is formatted as though SSH is used. So it's still the same record line format whether the SSH is used or not. The destination location can be the same or different for each script and is specified independently for each record. And in this video I'll demonstrate using the one single record that we see here. Thus it will cause the AutoContent script to automatically generate documentation for itself. So if the source location for the script, let's look at this, the source location for the script is determined to be local, or the destination location for the automatically generated documentation is local, then SSH is not used. A simple copy command is executed to transfer the files. So let's get out of this file. I'm going to quit without writing, and we'll clear the screen, and let's look at our local host name. So we see our local host name is generic 01. So now let's cat our default AutoContent.dat file, our data file, and we see that the source host name is generic 01, and we see that our source destination name is also generic 01. So it's not going to have to use SSH to transfer files in this for this particular record. Now let's also remember in our usage message, let's go to script. Let's look at our usage message again. Remember, if we specify -h, that will generate standalone HTML files, and it will automatically include an AutoContent header.html and an AutoContent footer.html if they exist. Well, let's see if those exist. And what do you know? That exists. So let's see what's in it. So if we look at the contents of AutoContent header.html, we see it contains this information. So that will be included in our standalone HTML at the top, at the header of our HTML output. And so now let's do the same. Let's look for our footer file. And we see that does not exist. So it's not going to include a footer file. You don't have to have both. You can have one or the other. So we're going to see that we're going to include our AutoContent, our header file. We're going to include this file in our HTML output, but we don't have a footer file, so it will get default footer information. So first, let's run the AutoContent script with the -? option again. We had just done that. So let's do that again. And we can see all our options here for running this script. So now then, let's run the AutoContent script to try to generate the HTML documentation. And we'll specify the verbose option, the -v option, and we'll specify the -H option to generate standalone files. And remember, when it generates the standalone HTML files, if the default header and footer files exist, they will be included in the standalone HTML file. Now we saw that we have a default header file at .autocontent_header.html, but we don't have a default footer file. So now let's try to run this script with the -v and -h options. So we'll do content -v, we said, for verbose output, and a -H for to generate standalone HTML files. So let's go ahead and run that now. And we can see that it executed, and what it did here is that it saw that we were to use the .autocontent.dat file, the default file, and so it read information from that file. It found a record in that file, and it divided that record into its various portions. So we see the port number, the username, the machine name, the file name, and we also see that we had the flag, the -? Option specified in that record, in that data record. So it's going to cause that script to run with the -? Option. We also see our destination, port, username, machine name, and directory name. And so we saw that it built an AutoContent usage document, and it built an AutoContent code document, and then it tried to copy those documents to the destination location, which from our record line in our AutoContent.dat file was home dfrench temp. So that was a directory, a local directory called temp under my home directory. So it copied the two different files there, the AutoContent file, the AutoContent doc file, and the AutoContent file. Now, since the host name is the same as the destination machine, it didn't have to do SSH to transfer the file. It just copied the file. It just used a copy command, a regular copy command. So if these local host names had been different, if this had been remote host names, it would have tried to use SCP to copy those files. So now we know that it generated standalone HTML files for us. So let's open a file folder window, and we see under home dfrench temp, which was our destination location, we see that we have two documents out there. We have an AutoContent doc and we have an AutoContent. So let's look at the AutoContent doc first, which is the usage document. And at the top of that document we can see that it ran the script with the -? option. So the script was actually executed with the -? option, which generated this usage message. And this usage message was captured for the documentation and included in the documentation. And if we scroll down, then we can also see, remember all those comments that were in the script? Well, it extracted all those comments and included those in the documentation. So all of that documentation that began with 4 hash marks and a space, that is all now included in this documentation, formatted in HTML output. And remember, we said that any line ending in a colon would be in bold text. Well, we see those lines that end in a colon are in bold text. And we see that where we had paragraph markers in our documentation in the script, the things are separated into paragraphs in our HTML documentation. So we see that it nicely formatted. It extracted all the documentation from the script and nicely formatted it for us into a standalone HTML document, and even included the usage message in that documentation. So now then, let's go back to our file folder and look at the source code. Remember, we generated 2 different files. We generated that usage document. We also created a source code document called AutoContent. And within that HTML document is the source code for the script. Now, it has been, some characters have been replaced with HTML friendly characters, but we see that it is formatted and available now in an HTML format that can be included on a website. So now let's close this window for the source code, and we're going to leave this window open for the documentation. Remember, we've got our usage message here, and now let's go back to our data file and remove that segment of the data line that has the -? on it, and we'll regenerate that usage documentation. So let's edit. We will VI the .autocontent.dat file, and what we're going to do is remove this segment, the colon -? So what we're doing is telling it not to run the usage message from the script. So now then, let's rerun our AutoContent program. AutoContent minus lowercase v, uppercase h. So we're going to regenerate that documentation. So it ran again, and so now let's go back to this window that contains our AutoContent doc file. And so we see here's the usage message. Well, let's reload that file now and see what we get, now that we told it not to run the usage message. And we see that that usage message was now removed. The only thing we have in that file is the extracted comments from the script. So when you include that colon -? on the record line, it runs the script with the -? option. If you don't include it, it doesn't run the script and you don't get the usage message. So that's the way that flag, that -? flag, is used in the record line. So only include that if your script can be executed with that option. So I'll close this window now. come back to our main page. So this automated methodology of generating documentation from your scripts will provide lots of benefits to your organization, as we outlined in the beginning of this video. Using the data file, as we saw, you can schedule the AutoContent script to automatically generate documentation for all the scripts across your entire organization, whether they exist locally or remotely within your organization. You can then forward that documentation to one or more web servers wherever your documentation is stored. So you can schedule the documentation updates so that it ensures business continuity, disaster recovery, auditing, maintenance, support, training efforts. All of these things are kept up to date by doing automated documentation. So everything is kept up to date and current through your automated documentation. So now the question is, how do I get this AutoContent script? Well, if you will go to mtxia.com, you'll see a page that looks like this. Go to Download and then Scripts, and go to Corn, and from here go to Content Management. You'll see at the top of this is a script called AutoContent, and you can get the script. You can freely download that script here, and so it is available, and you can download it and use it however you want. The whole script is here. So that's where you get it. Go to mountzia.com, download Scripts, Corn, Content Management, and AutoContent, and there's that script. And so that is it on how to automatically generate documentation from scripts using the AutoContent script. If you would like to see additional advanced scripting topics and videos, you can go to mountzia.com, mtxia.com, download Scripts and Corn, and there are lots and lots of scripts and videos out there for you to see and from which to learn. That is the end of this video. Thank you for listening and watching.